infidelity is happening everywhere. I think the statistics is I think like 30-40% of people have had an external relationship at some point or another outside of their committed relationship. And yet it's like it's this taboo. Yeah, well, I'm Filipino. So in the Philippine culture, having a mistress is so normal. It's almost expected. Part of the pain is, yeah, feeling betrayed by our partner who promised us monogamy, promised us that we were the only one. But the real pain and suffering that we experience as the one who got betrayed is all of the stories and the lies that we tell ourselves. The only person we care about is ourselves, our own survival. And so when that survival is threatened, maybe that looks like a lack of connection, a lack of intimacy, a lack of sex, a lack of affection, a lack of appreciation, any of those things.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode in Stories and Stanza. Hi, Jeanell, welcome back. I look forward to talking to you again on our podcast.
Thanks, Ira. I'm happy to be here again. And thanks everyone who listened to our first podcast. It was a lot of fun.
It was a lot of fun, and I want to say this to our listeners that Janelle and I recorded an episode on relationships mostly, and she is a relationship coach from Ontario. And then it was one of the most loved episodes in the podcast. It had more than 2,000 views, I think. And after the success of the episode, I decided to focus more on YouTube as opposed to audio version of the podcast. The audio is of course there, but I think video podcast, the way it allows me to connect with the guests, hear from them, that's really wonderful. So welcome,
Absolutely.
welcome back.
Thank
You are a
you.
great speaker, and
Thank you.
most importantly, like we did the episode about 1 year ago, and from then till now, I have shared that episode so many times with so many specific people who have
Mhm.
approached me for some questions, some guidance, some directions. So I think you are doing a wonderful job.
Thank you for sharing that. That warms my heart to hear because, I don't know who I touch. I don't know where my message gets received. So it's nice to get that feedback. Thank you.
And thank you for joining me on such a short notice. I wanted to hear from you something that is creating a lot of storm and social media buzz is
Mm,
Infidelity from the Coldplay concert. So
yes.
it's all over. I open Facebook, I open Instagram, it's just all over the place. And
Yeah.
when I heard the news, I thought that, we are being judgmental very quickly because this came to light. And
Yeah.
today, what I wanted to hear from you is both sides of the story. So, someone who has had their very personal moment being thrown in the public, what does that mean? Just be curious about what that person is going through, or why did they did what they did. Like, we are criticizing them, right? We are criticizing them, we are humiliating them and all that. So we what if we were curious and we wanted to understand why they did what they did, and understand this also from relationships point of view, as to what it means when you are struggling. Your relationships can take a lot of work, and because we don't know, a lot of times we struggle. So we will look at both sides of the
Yeah.
story. That's why I requested if you could spare some time and talk about it. So the first thing is, when you heard the incident, right? You are a relationship coach. What was the first thought in your mind?
My first thought was, oh my gosh. And then I saw flashes of different versions of the photo. So there was one of them hugging and looking happy, and then there was another photo of them perhaps when they realized what was happening, like that oh crap moment. Like it was like kind of like that moment. And yeah, I had definitely a moment of judgment too. I was like, ha, busted. That was probably my first thought. Ha, busted, right? Because infidelity is happening everywhere. I think the statistics is I think like 30-40% of people have had an external relationship at some point or another outside of their committed relationship. And yet it's like it's this taboo. It's like this dark, dirty secret that everyone does, but no one really talks about it. And those that talk about it know nothing about it or are on the receiving end. But to your point, if we actually dig a little deeper to understand the motivations of why it even happens, and not even the motivations, but even going back to thousands of years when, like, just evolution and just humans in general, I think that we can maybe bring compassion, and if not compassion, at least an understanding of why we do what we do. And I think a lot of people, what I tend to notice is people go, yeah, but that's no excuse. Hey, I'm not saying it's excuse. I'm just saying this is a probability of why it happens. I'm not saying it's good, bad. I'm just saying that this might be why it happens so that we can not be so judgmental. And to be honest, before my first marriage, if I heard about people who got divorced, I would, I'd be very judgmental about it too. It's like, oh, they got divorced. Oh my gosh, they must have given up so easily. They don't understand family values. I was very judgmental about it until I was in that situation. And I'm Catholic, so to us, like, divorce is not even an option. It's like, no, you get married once and you work it out. And, I have a very strong I have very strong values, but in that moment, like, deciding that no, divorce is the only thing that I see my way out of this, I have a very different perspective now. And I understand why people do what they do. And now, being a relationship coach, I have the front seat to all of it. And not only do I have the front seat, but I can, working with clients, I can get them to a place where they even understand why they do what they do. Because oftentimes they don't know why they do what they do. They just do it, they just react. It's just like this impulsive behavior that they don't even really think about it. They just kind of do it. And so, yeah, I think there's so much more to this than what meets the eye.
Precisely. And that is what we are going to talk about in our episode today. And
Sure.
why it got me curious is that this one got found out, but there are many more that are not found. And then there are certain amount of exploitation in it, there are certain amount of abuse mixed in it, and I'm not trying to defend anyone. I am trying to be objective about why infidelity happens. And is this something we need to revisit in terms of modern society, or is it something we have inherited through years and years of evolution, social evolution, let's say?
Yeah.
So how,
Yeah.
as a coach, how do you see it?
Yeah. Well, I'm Filipino. So in the Philippine culture, having a mistress is so normal. It's almost expected. I remember my father cheated on my mom. In my last episode, in our first podcast, I think I shared my story,
Yes.
but those that didn't hear it, my parents had a fantastic marriage. They had their own business. They were always laughing. They went dancing. They had date nights. They did all the right thing, went to church together. And then all of a sudden, my mom's best friend, who was quite a bit younger and lived in our basement, had an eye for my father, saw how much my father loved my mom and doted on her. And she wanted a piece of that action and seduced my father, and she got pregnant. and my father chose to leave to raise their son. And about 2 years later, my dad got sick, asked to come home so that my mom could take care of him because he had nobody to take care of him at that time. And my mom said yes, and she forgave him. And, for the next 13 years before my dad passed away, my dad was a better husband, a better father, and he found God again at a deeper level. And so, you would think that was the happy ending, but as I got older into my 20s, after my dad had passed away, I realized that there was still a lot of deep hurt and anger and resentment that I had been carrying for my father for what I went through. But, in doing the work, I realized that I created that experience of myself. I did, not my father. And so that was part of my healing, was to realize all those stories that I made up about myself, all those stories I made up about my dad had nothing to do with my dad. It actually had to do with me and the 9-year old who made up these stories. And I know for some people that might be a little bit too deep, but that's what it looks like to do the work, because to do the work means at the end of the day that I get freedom from this thing that's holding me almost hostage. And, that thing is usually trauma. And I didn't want to live like that anymore, because I realized that had I held on to those stories about myself, about my dad, about men, that men were cheaters, that men were liars, that men would leave you eventually. I realized that I had to give up those stories in order to give myself a chance at love, like real love. And I am now married to my husband for 20 years, and he is the epitome of perfection and partnership and joy and passion. And I could not ask for more. But I had to do the work in order to allow myself to experience love at that deep level. So, talking about coming back to infidelity as a subject, part of the pain is, yeah, feeling betrayed by our partner who promised us monogamy, promised us that we were the only one. But the real pain and suffering that we experience as the one who got betrayed is all of the stories and the lies that we tell ourselves because of what that other person did. You could have done everything perfectly, right? You could have been the perfect wife or perfect husband, and this happened. And what often people do is they go, "Oh, I'm not good enough. I just wasn't good enough. If I was better, if I was prettier, if I was smarter, if I made more money, then maybe he wouldn't have cheated on me or she wouldn't have cheated on me." But that's not true. And so that's the part that we need to heal to get freedom and power back from when we feel like we're victimized. And then on the flip side, on the person who has done the cheating, I think many times people go, "Oh, well, that was a very selfish act." True, it was. However, let's be honest. Who do we really care about? The only person we care about is ourselves, our own survival. And so when that survival is threatened, maybe that looks like a lack of connection, a lack of intimacy, a lack of sex, a lack of affection, a lack of appreciation, any of those things, right? Now we start to feel threatened, and our safety of ourselves is being questioned, and our self-worth gets questioned. Now we're looking for someone to validate us. All of a sudden, someone starts to show us interest, or maybe we start to complain about how our partner doesn't do what they say, isn't a great husband or isn't a great wife. And that other person is like, "Yeah, me too. I feel the exact same way." Now they've bonded over their struggle. And now they have this connection that is almost unbreakable. Because in those moments when we feel so alone, especially when we're feeling shame, right? Or unloved. And then someone else says, hey, you know what? I feel the same way too. Now they've created this bond. And I think a lot of times that's a lot of times how the affairs start. Now, the emotional affairs specifically, which often turn into physical affairs. Now, but then there's also the infidelity that's just, I want to live in a fantasy world, right? It's not even real. It's like they haven't had, their partner and them, they've been married for 30 years. And I hear this all the time. We've been married for 30 years. We haven't had sex in 10 years. And my partner isn't interested. And every time I go to request that we have intimate time, they reject me. So now I feel validated to go and cheat. Well, you don't want me. Well, then maybe someone else will want me, right? So there's a need that is being unfulfilled, especially for those that have the love language of physical touch. When someone gets their physical touch rejected, like, or the request for physical touch rejected, it's like a knife in their heart, right? And so I think it's unfair for us to judge those people. Because the way I think about it is, for some people, sex or intimacy or kisses and hugs is like oxygen. And when they don't get it, they feel like they're dying, right? And so I think there's something to be responsible for there. When your partner says, hey, I need a hug, I need kisses, we need to have sex at least once a year or once a month, and it's not being honored, I think that personally, I think that is a betrayal of the marriage right there, because we have an agreement. So then my question to that person is, well, if your partner, your husband, your wife is saying no to sex and you want it, if not them, then who? You can only shop in one store, and that store doesn't carry the thing you want. Of course you're going to go and look for it. But then we judge people for looking for it. Well, they didn't have it here. But I think there's just so much misunderstanding, especially for people who've never been in that situation. It's so easy to sit back and just judge. But here's the flip side of it. Those people who are judging often are in miserable relationships. So is it morally, or are they better people? Are they happier staying in a marriage that they're miserable in? Like, what's the better thing? Stay in a marriage that you're miserable, or have an affair? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And that is, thank you for sharing like the both sides of the conundrum, let's say. And I'm not, justifying any one over the other. I want to share something really beautiful I recently heard from one of my guests, and she wrote a book called Letters from You to You. And I'm just going to share something very tiny, but when I read that sentence, it kind of shook me. And I read that again and again, like a number of times. So it said that when you meet people, you meet some people, and sometimes, you connect very well. Sometimes you always have a kind of a argument or hate towards one another, and sometimes people do not impress you at all, and then they just pass you by. So think about this, like everyone around you is showing you a mirror of who you are. So some people reflect something nice in you and you immediately connect. Some people remind you of something you are keeping inside and you fight with them. And some people have no overlap, that's why you have no connection with them. And it made me think deeply about it, and I reflected on it from time to time, and it's such a beautiful thought that I got. And I felt that we go into relationships without knowing who we are or what the relationship is going to give us. And you are a coach, So I wanted to hear your thoughts, like whether someone is walking into a relationship or like a new one for the first time, or they haven't
Mhm.
had a broken relationship and then they are going into the next one.
Mhm.
Do we completely know? Like, where do the problems arise? Do we have self-awareness walking into the relationship, or we don't?
Yeah, I would say 99% of, maybe not 99, maybe 90% of people aren't fully equipped to have a relationship. They know they want a relationship, but they don't have any idea what that even means. I would say even the same thing with marriage. People go, I want to be married, but they don't want to be a husband. They're not willing to do the work. They want the title, they want the house, they want the kids. But what they don't realize, marriage is sacrifice. Marriage is putting, like every time I make a decision, I'm thinking about my husband. Every time I open my mouth and communicate something, I'm thinking to myself, okay, am I communicating this in the most loving way possible so that my husband can actually hear me and not get upset? Or am I just speaking from anger and emotion and not actually being responsible because somehow I'm almost blaming him for something and that excuses my bad behavior? I think the problem is it's generational, you know? We are a sum of our our parents, of society, of our ego, of like all these different things, mostly our experiences. And we go into relationships thinking that person that we're with understands us, knows what it's like, has been through the same thing, thinks the way we think, and that's just, there's nothing farther from the truth. And we think, oh, I just need to find someone just like me. No, you don't. That's where the clash is. So, you were talking about connection earlier. I believe that we often attract someone who is our polar opposite because there's something about them that they possess that we don't. And we admire that. Like when I look at my husband is the most patient person I know. I am not patient. My husband is the most easygoing, grounded, just peaceful guy. I'm the intense one. I'm always like chasing the thing. And somehow we are the yin to each other's yang. He grounds me, I motivate him. But oftentimes, because we're so different, and if we don't understand how to use our differences to play our strengths and to actually create a better team, if we think about a team, so I'm going to segue for a second. If you think about a hockey team, because I'm in Canada, so we're big in hockey. Imagine if every player played the same position. It wouldn't be a very good team. You need someone who shoots left, shoots right, shoots center, shoots from far, shoots from right to create that fullness. And I feel like a relationship is the same way. To try to find someone who's exactly like you, I don't think is the right thing. But oftentimes when people come to me and say, oh, Jeanell, my relationship isn't working, we're just too different. It's like, of course you're different. What's the problem? And so I think we just need to, I don't think we were taught, and I wish we were taught in school these social skills, how to communicate, understanding what it means to be human, to understand the part of the ego, to understand the part of the subconscious mind. I think those are things that we should have gotten educated on, not all these things that make no difference in our practical day-to-day life.
That is so beautiful. And I I think so too. I feel that I had a few difficult years in my life. Like after my daughter was born, my wife went through a severe period of depression and other symptoms. And I
Hmm.
didn't understand this, what
Yeah.
she was going through. And it took me a lot of time to understand her and understand myself in that process.
Right.
And when I did that, then I felt that this is something I need to share, which is where the podcast was born. That there is there are so many beautiful things that we miss. They're right in front of us, and
Yes.
when we I that way I see it is like we have ego. It's like you are in a box, but when you have awareness, like you are the whole world, you have everything. So I feel that when we walk into relationships, we are not self-aware, which is where all these
Yeah.
challenges happen.
Yeah. And I actually I coach mostly men, but I do have a few female clients. And I was talking to my client yesterday, and she went on this date, and she's trying to find her future husband. And I could see her really trying to make it work. And she had all these complaints about how, his type of music, the kind of questions he had asked her. And she was trying to figure it out. And I said to her, I said, why are you trying to force this relationship? Like, this is a first date. This is not like months and months. This is just a first date. I said, why are you trying to fit him in like a perfect shoe? He doesn't fit, but why are you trying to fit it? And I think so many times when we want to be connected and we don't experience that, we will almost betray ourself, our authentic self, just to be loved and accepted by others. But oftentimes, it's not the right people that we want to love and accept us. They are not the fit, they are not the person we're looking for. And so oftentimes women talk about falling in love with a man's potential. So it's not who he is, it's who he says he is, it's who he promises to be. But because we so badly want to feel connection, so badly wanting to feel love and find our person and feel safe, that we will actually almost go into like an illusion, like a fantasy world, and not actually deal with the reality of it. And I think that that's something like what I went through in my first marriage. I just really wanted to get married. I just really wanted to have kids, and it almost didn't matter with whom. And I think some of us, we try, unless you know who you are, like your value system, you will date anyone who isn't a fit. And then now trying to leave the relationship is so hard. And therefore, but some people go, well, I don't want to hurt their feelings. I don't want to make them angry. I don't want to break up with them. So what do? They cheat. Because that's easier than actually communicating to your partner, hey, I'm not happy. Hey, I think we should go separate ways. They would just rather avoid that conversation altogether and then cope by having this other thing going on. And I think sometimes the having the two relationships is maybe a fear of saying no to one or the other or missing out, FOMO. Talk about FOMO. I think a lot of times it's just the fear of being honest. But I think a lot of times it's like we don't want to, it's like, okay, well, what if I break up with this person to be with this person, but then it doesn't work out with this person, and now I regret breaking up with this person. So to avoid making a bad mistake or the wrong decision, I'm just going to keep them both. And then I'll just figure it out. But of course, they don't figure it out until they get caught.
That's
And now,
another perspective to look at.
yeah.
And you reminded me of something which I struggled with a long time in my life was, let's say, making friends. I used
Mm,
to think that I definitely need friends, and then
mm,
I would end up making friends with the wrong people with whom my thinking doesn't align, my values do not align. And because I think that need to be accepted, it comes from a low self-esteem.
ah. Yeah. And bringing that back to marriage, that's a thing too, is I'm noticing sometimes we kind of get stuck in this place where, especially I feel like women do this more than men, to be honest, is that we try to mother our husbands rather than being their partner who supports them and loves them. We end up being like, you did this wrong. You didn't make the bed right. You did it. Like it becomes this, instead of two people like this, it is like, yeah, it is not an equal partnership. And if the man feels emasculated because his wife just keeps nagging him and telling him all the things he's not doing right, he starts to shut down and he starts to disconnect. And all of a sudden, again, here comes someone who smiles, who's kind, who understands, who listens, who smile, who actually they enjoy being around. It makes sense that they would want to spend more time with people that make them feel good. Now, I'm taking the morality out of this. I'm not talking about what's moral. I'm just saying, like, as a human, we gravitate to people who make us feel good. So if being at home doesn't feel good, but you feel obligated to be at home because of your kids, because you own the house, because you're married and your wife expects you, that's a very different experience to over here with the mistress, where they feel they can be themselves, they get all the affection they want, they're missed. Who doesn't want that? Right? And so when couples come to me, we talk about this because it's not just one person, it's two people who contributed to this outcome of this relationship going, the condition of the relationship. And so it doesn't work. There's no way you can save a marriage if all you're doing is blaming one person. There has to be two people who take accountability for it. And but to be honest, sometimes it has nothing to do with the partner. Very few, but it does happen where the wife could have done everything perfectly and he still would have cheated. And so, to your point, that's where we go and do the inside work. It's like, okay, why, if everything is great with my wife or with your wife, if your marriage is great, why would you jeopardize that by living this other life with this other person? Right? And sometimes it's the thrill, sometimes they're bored, sometimes they just want the attention.
Yes.
So there's, like you said, there's so many reasons, but I think that, oh, it shouldn't happen, or why do people, like, they're crazy or they're selfish, or like all these other stories about them, I think is a very shallow and superficial way of looking at it. And yeah, like you said, it's so quick to judge, but if we actually stop and really look at, like, understand what the fundamental needs of us as humans are, we can maybe have a little bit of perhaps understanding and compassion for people who make this, and a lot of times they're very remorseful. They made the mistake. And we almost like commit them to like this prison, and we make it mean that's who they are. Who they are is a cheater, liar, sneaky bastard, right? Like this very negative, what do you call it? A negative, I guess, identity, or, of who this person is. It's not who they are. And, to be honest with you, Abra, I've been in that situation. I know what that's like to feel so alone, to feel so, just wanting so badly to feel alive again, and craving to feel love, craving to feel hugged, to feel beautiful, for someone to see me, for someone to actually understand and take the time to hear me. And when we feel that, like, it is priceless. And so I think oftentimes, I think one of the things that that a lot of the conversation is like, well, then what's the point of marriage? Right? Like, why do we even get married? Do we even need to get married? Like, what's actually the benefit of it? And if we go back generations, really, what marriage was survival, right? The man went out to hunt, he got the food, he made sure that the cave was protected from the lions and the bears, and the women stayed in the cave reproduced, nurtured the children, right? And provided that care, right? But now in the modern day, it's all messed up, right? Now women are working and men are expected to, and I think it's just caused so much confusion. Some of people are kind of stuck in the old traditional ways. Some of us are kind of in the middle, and then there's others that are like, no, everything is equal. But it's not that's right or wrong. It's just what works. So I think to judge other people in the way that they live their life, if they're happy, good for them. But just because we don't agree with it doesn't mean we have to judge it. Because if it works for them and it has integrity and they're not hurting anyone and they're honoring themselves and their self worth and self respect, who are we to say? You know, I remember when I first became a relationship coach, I read a lot about polyamory. And I never really knew about that until I got into this business. And I'm like, wow, that's a thing? Like, how does that even work? And yeah, I was super judgy about it. I'm like, how do you have multiple partners? Right? But if it works for them and they're happy, good for them, you know?
Yeah. You touched upon something very important about generational trauma. And you mentioned that, a lot of times women try to mother their husband.
Yeah.
And a lot of times men feel that, like when we are talking about, okay, there are strained relationships, bad marriages and stuff, but then some people are just, they are polyamorous because they want to. So there is certain amount of generational behavior, I guess, transcending on both men and women, right? And now in today's date, you also said that the gender roles are changing, and then there is a spectrum. You can be here, you can be in the middle, and you can be, completely on the opposite side. So it gets very confusing. So how do we truly understand ourselves?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think what's really missing, and I know this is going to sound redundant, but communication. It's actually that easy. We just need to learn to communicate. We need to learn how to be vulnerable. We need to understand our ego and how our ego shuts us down when we need to actually open that up. I think understanding that we all have our own journeys, we're all healing from different traumatic wounds from our past, big or small. I think we just look at things way too narrow. And I think if we just actually broaden our vision and take the time to stop and go within and get curious rather than being judgmental, get curious. But, again, I think all of the problems that I hear marriages have is all around communication, communicating our needs, communicating our expectations, communicating our frustrations, communicating what we want, communicating what we don't want, communicating when we're feeling really vulnerable. Like me and my husband, we've been together for 20 years, and there's still these moments when we lie in bed and opening myself up to him feels very scary, even though he is the most safest space in the world. For me to admit that I am afraid of losing him, that I'm afraid that he's not interested in me, that he'll eventually get bored of me, that maybe he's not as interested in our sex life. Like just all these insecurities that I have, I share all of that with him. And so he gets the opportunity to say to me, honey, I love you no matter what. You could shave your head and I would still think you were beautiful. And to be honest with you, I'm scared of the same thing. And I'm like, really? He's like, yeah. And so even though we've been together for so long, we still learn so much about each other. We still take the time to share what's really going on inside. And it's not a brought up by a situation. It's actually proactive. Each month I was like, hey, honey, how are we doing? Are you happy? Or I'll say, hey, honey, you know what? I'm so happy in our marriage. And they'll say, like, you know what? Me too. And again, we're continuously creating, building trust and safety in our marriage. So if I didn't do that, if I didn't know how he was, if I didn't even ask, yeah, chances are he would feel like I don't care. Chances are we wouldn't have the level of communication and vulnerability and intimacy that we have in our marriage. And the beautiful part about that is that intimacy emotionally translates into the bedroom for those that's important to them. But I just think that people are so busy these days. One of the homework I give up my clients who are so busy, I say, take 5 minutes every day, either to sit down and have a tea and just talk. Just like, hey, how was your day? What was the best part about it? What'd you do? Or the other option I give them, I say, 5 minutes is too much for you. Why don't you ask your partner for a hug and do like a 30-second, like real hug where you just feel each other's bodies. And you don't say anything. You don't need to just be touching each other for 30 seconds. And you know how many couples don't do that? They can't. They don't make the time. It's like 2 minutes, 5 minutes. They can't even make time for each other. That's the problem. We're so busy trying to please our bosses, keep the house clean, that we forget that this is just as important to maintain.
You reflected on something very nice, as in, we said we always tend to be judgmental as opposed to be curious and open minded. And I
Yeah.
see that as like being judgmental is a reflection of poor EQ, and
Mhm.
being curious is high emotional intelligence.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Especially with the ego, you
yes,
know? 'Cause the ego will just keep saying, they don't care about you, they don't listen, you're not good enough, but you have to interrupt it. Okay, hold on a second. Where's that coming from? Why is it true? Why is it not true? Rather than just being like, okay, like just accepting it as truth. No, we need to stop and go, okay, where is that voice coming from? Because a lot of times that voice isn't our voice. It's our mom, it's our grandma, it's those, right? It's actually not our own voice. For me, I'm very hard on myself. Since I was 3 years old, I've been a competitive dancer, I've been a pianist, I've always done straight A's in school, and I've always had teachers that were very strict. Like they would yell at me. And so oftentimes when I'm really in a stressful situation and I could hear that voice, Jeanell, what are you doing? It's not good enough, right? You're slacking, you're lazy. It's actually, I realize it's actually not my voice, it's my dance teacher. And she may have not said those words, but when I feel that pressure, she's who I think of. But again, it takes work and the digging to actually go and go, okay, is it actually not my voice? Right? How many people actually stop and go, hold on a second. Wait a minute, that's not me. Who is that? Who's that voice? Is it? And then when you hear the voice, well, is it true? How is it true? What if it wasn't true? What would be possible if it wasn't true? Could I create a new context rather than being stuck in this place of this dark, low vibration called guilt, frustration, right? Pain and suffering, all the things that humans do. And so this is the work. This is the work we
yes.
do.
I like to share this with our audience today as well. Like, I talk about emotional intelligence in a lot of episodes. And, I think this curiosity, it comes, journaling helps on this in a great way.
Yes, I love journaling. I'm a big fan of journaling because you know what's really great about journaling is it actually not only accesses your conscious mind, it actually accesses your subconscious mind. Because when you're writing, it takes time to write. So you actually have to kind of slow down your thoughts. And so instead of just reacting and reacting, you're actually like processing it as you're writing. And I tell you, whenever I'm stuck, Abra, about anything, I journal about it. And sometimes my journal is just dumping all of my thoughts and my emotions, especially if you're the kind of person that is an overthinker, an overanalyzer. This is where journaling really helps because you're taking all that energy from your brain and putting it and transferring that energy into the paper. And so it can actually be a really therapeutic experience. But for me, a lot of times if I'm in a really dark place, I actually, dear God, and I just start writing to God. And I just let everything out with no filter. And the cool thing is, by the end of it, I come out of it in a really positive way. And I don't know how it happens. I don't know if it's something I'm purposely doing, but I always end up feeling so much more at peace, so much more compassionate, so much more trusting that whatever is happening in my life in that moment, whatever struggle or challenge I'm dealing with, is there for a reason, is there to teach me something. It is my next plateau or my next level of evolution that I need to learn in order to get to the next level. And so I've trained myself to look at these things as all as opportunities and lessons instead of challenges or looking at it as like in the victim standpoint. Why me? Right? And for me, spiritually, it has been a lesson of trust, of divine timing, of patience, and self love. Because, and also trusting that it's all meant to be. Because I think we get stuck in the regret. Coulda, shoulda, woulda. I should have done that. I would have done that. I could have done that, right? But consider that it all, even infidelity. My clients will tell you their marriage is better now than before the infidelity happened. So sometimes things need to get broken so that they can be rebuilt.
I think in today's world we do not use self-love enough as a
Yeah.
tool. Like, we are always hateful and, questioning things and being hard on ourselves. But the moment we bring in self-love, it can repair a lot of damages.
Yeah. You know, my, what's the word I'm looking for? I'm not excited with the word. I can't think. It's like 9 o'clock at night here, so I think my brain is trying to turn off. But I guess my belief around, we're talking about self-love, right? Um, my belief around self-love is that if we, sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Take
Okay,
it
sorry, can you
easy.
say what you were saying? What we were saying just like
I,
30 seconds ago?
I,
I
I
had a
was
thought and I lost it.
I was saying that it's my observation, that
Yeah.
we do not use self-love enough as a tool. Like, a lot of times I have to remind this to my wife that when she's having a difficult day at work, somebody said something to her at work and she's upset. And I tell her that you are not really upset on the said person. Something else happened within you. And just be easy to yourself. And if you are hurtful to yourself, you cannot come out of it. If you made a
Mhm.
mistake, you made a mistake. I have made thousands of mistakes. And I tell this to my daughter as well, that self love is very important. You tried for something, you didn't get it. So
Yeah.
self love is important, that, be
Yeah. To
compassionate.
be on, if I'm really honest with you, I really didn't understand self-love until just in the last few years. Like to the depth that I do. Because if you said to me, Jeanell, do you love yourself? I'm like, yeah, of course I do. I'm confident. I got a great life. I love myself. I'm a cool person. But in those, like you said, in those moments of darkness, in those moments of perhaps, conflict with other people, For example, I lost a best friend last year, and I couldn't, I beat myself up about, like, okay, what did I do for that relationship to fall apart? And, I'm playing the tape over my head, and there was nothing there. Like, there was nothing I could have done. And yet, for some reason, I kept blaming myself for that. Right. And why a lot of times there's like the logical mind, that's the common sense mind, but then there's also this other mind, which is the subconscious mind. And so when we have a moment of when we get triggered, it's triggering something else from previous in our life that we may or may not be present to. Right. And so oftentimes we're dealing with the person in front of us as though they're the actual trigger point, but that is actually just a small piece of something that happened way long ago, right? So I have to tell the story because so me and my husband never fight. Never. I can count maybe twice in like 10 years that we've had like a bad argument because we have really great communication. But just this weekend, I went camping, and my husband loves to be a manly man. He wants to do everything. He's the kind of guy who'll say, "Honey, you just sit there, take care of the dog. I'll do all the work. I'll put up the tent. I'll do," like, he loves that. And I'll come over and I'll say, "Hey, can I help you? Do you need a hand?" He's like, "No, I got this." Anyway, so I'm sitting on my camping chair, and my sister comes over to me and she says, "Why are you just sitting in that chair when your husband's doing all that work?" And I got a bit defensive. I said, "Well, this is how it's always been for 20 years. Like, he doesn't want me to help him. He's a bit of a control freak." And so my husband's, probably 30 feet away. And he says, "Hey, I'm not a control freak." Right? And so me and my sister start talking. Anyway, I'm getting really upset. Like, I'm getting triggered by my sister. Right? Because I'm making it mean that she's telling me that I'm not a good wife, or that I'm lazy, or I'm making my husband do everything and I do nothing. There's some sort of conversation in that. And my husband says nothing. Okay. So anyway, I'm upset at this point. We get in the car to go home. And about 5 seconds into the car ride, I turned to my husband, really upset. And I said to him, "Why didn't you stand up for me?" And he goes, "What? What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, my sister." And I was like kind of reiterating the conversation. And he says, "Oh, babe, I didn't even hear that." I said, "Yeah, but you responded. You said, I'm not controlling," whatever he said, right? I said, you responded, so clearly you were listening." He's like, "Not really." He's like, "I was packing the car," right? He was going back and forth packing the car. But in my mind, because he didn't stick up for me, I made it mean that he didn't love me, or that he didn't have my back. Anyway, so I'm in the car. I'm dead silent. I'm upset. And I start to cry. And my logical mind is like, "Jeanell, why are you crying? Like, this is so weird." He just didn't hear it. And maybe your sister wasn't trying to attack you. She was probably just, you know, maybe she was joking, who knows? But here I am in tears. And so here's my husband. He's sitting beside me. He goes, "Honey, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I didn't stand up for you. I'm sorry that, you know, like, hurt you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me." But I'm still upset. So I go, this is the work. I go in, I go, "Okay, Jeanell, why are you still upset? What's really going on?" Right? What's really going on underneath? What's really going on? And as soon as I asked that question, I remembered. I remember being 12 years old in a schoolyard, and I got bullied a lot. I was smart. I had black braces. I had glasses. I was short. I was colored. I got bullied for everything. And so it reminded me of being in the schoolyard with these kids who I thought were my friends, and these people hurting me physically and emotionally and verbally, and my friends just standing around doing nothing. So that thing that my husband didn't even do anything. I made it mean that, or that experience triggered a memory in the schoolyard. So as soon as I saw that, I told my husband, I said, honey, actually, I realize why I'm so upset is because it triggered trauma from my childhood of when I got bullied. And my friends did not stand up for me. And when you didn't stand up for me there, that really upset me. He was like, wow, okay, got it. Like he understood why I was so now he doesn't have to feel bad. He doesn't have to feel guilty. He doesn't feel like he's a bad husband. He gets, oh, Jeanelle's just dealing with something of her own. But this is why communication is so important. Otherwise, it would have probably been a very quiet and awkward ride home. And instead, it was a beautiful ride home once I got the tears out. But clearly, I had to feel what I felt. And, my husband is so emotionally intelligent and intuitive that he just allowed me to cry and feel whatever I was feeling and didn't take it personally. And for that, I so appreciate him as the leader of this family and as my partner, who we have such a strong trust bond because of that.
That is beautiful and very heartwarming. I think we can conclude our discussion on such beautiful note of self-love, reflection,
Yeah.
curiosity, communication, and that builds everything. That builds everything. We have a story in our mind, but we don't
Yeah.
always validate whether that story is the right story.
Right. We don't question it. And I think that is it. Having a growth mindset is always questioning it and looking at things from different aspects, different viewpoints. And I think more importantly, Abra, more important is realizing that consider there is, for the most part, no right or wrong. We all have our own beliefs and our own values based on what we grew up with. And to be able to try to understand that, or at least be curious about the other person's point of view rather than judging it, criticizing it, and condemning them, I think we could probably cut the divorce rates more than in half.
And once again, to our listeners, if you want to work with Janelle, she's a wonderful relationship coach, and I will leave the link to our first discussion as well and her website. So feel free to reach out to her. And thank you once again, Janelle, for your time today.
Thank you, Abra. Thanks. So it was a great conversation. I'm really glad that we got to talk about it. And hopefully this gives people something to think about as to what they can do to for themselves. I think it's so easy for us to look and judge other people, but to actually go within and go, okay, where am I out of integrity is more important and more useful.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we touched upon some really important topics. And now, Stories and Stanza is also a blog. So I've started publishing on Substack so that a lot of times people come to me and then they ask that you did this episode, with an hour long discussion, but we forget what we talked about. So it kind of sums up that discussion as a text, and the episode is embedded. So anyone wants to listen, they can listen to it. And if they want to read it, come back to it, that's there. So that's all for today. Thank you, everyone who has joined us for this wonderful episode. See you in the next one.